Back in 1963, Bob Dylan wrote in a song, "The answer is blowing in the wind." He was thinking of liberty, but of course we are thinking of energy. Indeed, as the environment concerns increase and oil reserves approach exhaustion, renewable energies, and especially those coming from the wind, come to the forefront.
We are borrowing $1 billion a day, mainly from nations that don't like us or don't share our values, in order to import $1 billion of oil a day from nations largely that don't like us and don't share our values. This is a $700 billion hemorrhage or export in wealth that has beggared a nation that when I was a little boy owned half the wealth on the face of the earth.
It's an American product. Our wind doesn't have to be purchased from another country. It's competitive on its own right, especially in the wind corridor of the central United States.
And if we're going to really kind of delve into the development of new technologies that will help to ensure our competitive future, then wind has to be a very important part of the mix.
Back in the day, you could throw a wind turbine in the back of a pickup truck. and haul it to the site. Now the truck fits in the wind turbine. Takes 17, at minimum of 17 truckloads. And that's a variation of oversized loads versus regular tractor and trailer trucks that you would see going down the road. It takes 17 individual loads to deliver one wind turbine to a site, in the middle of a cornfield or in a prairie or on a plateau in Texas.
Interestingly, in purchasing the land, purchased it from people who bought it, like when they were young, and now they're old, and they bought it to make a real estate killing. As LA spreads north, they would have view property, like 5 acres on the side of a hill they've never seen. So anyway, so that's the way it's been, and then Zahn turned into Enron. Enron went over the cliff, and then the Enron estate, which was John Lamb, wound up selling off stuff. So AES bought the old Vestas turbines,
Right.
and all the other junk on the land. Caithness, who is now Terragen, owns the 750s that are up there, and they're clicking away. But the lease on the ground is for 30 years, which begins to run up in 2011. So the partnership...
Who would have thought, Rich?
Who would have thought? 30
30
ago.
years seemed like forever in our minds.
30 years will never come.
I think young people are very much in tune with this. We still have some old dragons that are just convinced that they have to, real men burn fuel. And we just need to move beyond that. We don't have the luxury of doing that anymore.
In 1992, the Texas Public Utility Commission, one of the commissioners was Carl Robigo, who had a strong, keen interest in the future of renewable energy in the U.S., and he thought that it would be a substantial contributor. And he was convinced that if California could have a significant amount of wind, why not Texas? And why couldn't we be a leader in this industry?
This section right here.
It'd be 12.
Right
Section 12.
Yeah, this is 13 down off the hill.
I see. Here's the deal. When you can look, the winds are blowing basically that direction, right?
Yes.
You can see, pretty much all the way to your other property. So a good wind site is one where you can look downwind and you can look upwind and you're not obstructed. So you've got the Uinta Mountains over there, which kind of shunt the flow north of it. So you've got unlimited access. There's no higher terrain for tens of miles that direction, which is upwind, and you've got a clean shot downwind. So that's what makes a really good spot. Okay. So that's kind of the background, and that's why we like your property up to the northeast. Is it's open, windswept country. It doesn't have dramatic terrain features, but those that it has will give you that extra 5 or 10%, and that's where people make the money.
My primary business for almost 30 years was real estate development. But I've been in other businesses, restaurants, excursion trains, senior citizen housing, mining, gold mining, and eventually I wound up in the wind energy business in California, and did the first major wind energy installation of 500 kW machines in the country. I found a great deal of similarity in doing that kind of a project to doing commercial real estate. There's sort of 6 things you got to have a project, and to be a successful developer, you need all 6 of them or you don't have anything. My definition of the development business is taking risks, solving problems, and providing a product that somebody wants to buy.
In July 1982, they issued a prospectus to raise funds to do a wind project in the Altamont Pass east of San Francisco. It was the first time anyone had ever done this, and within 3 weeks, they had received the entire $3 million of funding that they had requested.
And so the wind industry fits that basic description. And to be successful in those days in the wind business, you needed obviously land, you needed approval, you needed transmission, you needed, if you could generate electricity, you had to be able to ship it someplace, because where the wind blows, usually there's not too many people. You needed a purchase contract because you had to finance the development, and then you needed financing, and you needed construction.
And most of these investments were $5,000 or $10,000 from individuals. This is very unprecedented, and as it turned out, they offered me a $1,000 a month pay raise, which in 1982 meant real money. Now, I knew there were risks associated with this because PG&E will be there forever, and this company may or may not last. But I liked the idea of being involved in a new industry and really having a chance to participate, because my responsibility would be to collect data, to figure out exactly where each turbine would go, to estimate how much energy would be produced. It's really all the things that I've done for 25 years now, but here is the first chance to do it in a real commercial environment.
Well, it was a little bit like a gold strike, from what they tell me. I wasn't here, but it was a little bit like a gold strike. Guys running in all directions, deadlines to meet. A lot of the windmills that were designed by American designers didn't understand the stress of the wind. The thing that we talked about the energy levels. When wind speed doubles, the energy in the wind expands by 8 times. And so a lot of the early turbines that were built just couldn't handle. They literally fell apart, went to pieces.
So I took the job, and right after that, they decided to fund a second limited partnership. And this time, the $3 million they requested sold out within a week, and so they upped it to $6 million. So within 3 or 4 months, these guys had raised $9 million on equipment that had barely been tested.
As opposed to Italy, where they wanted to get this done because they wanted to become members of the EU, and they felt that this would help them become members of the EU to have the alternate energy program on the go. The U.S. government has deadlines. They always have deadlines on everything they do, and so these turbines, some of them, everything had to be done by the 31st of December, or you didn't get the tax credit. And so there's stories about guys cutting up pieces of plywood and bolting them on these things and spinning them by hand to get the electricity to go through the generator so they would qualify.
But yeah, there was everything from cardboard blades to camouflaging wind turbines for flyovers by the IRS or whoever was documenting that they did spend money on something here. So I'm not sure if it's going to work, but And just that mad rush. I mean, there were times where just to get enough workforce up on sites, we went out and cleaned out bars and bailed out jails. I mean, literally, just to get enough warm bodies to start assembling things to put wind turbines together. But
if we're going to get to the grid of the future with the renewable system of the future that we all need, that ultimately is going to provide us that American promise, you're going to have to take that opportunity and take the responsibility with that opportunity to support the smart grid and the strong grid.
I think it's one of many. I personally would think that we effectively need a mix of many things beyond just the wind, certainly solar, and maybe even doing a little bit more of our own domestic oil production, offshore drilling and stuff like that. So I think wind could be a part of a comprehensive review of how we generate power and energy. I think something to be said about nuclear too. I understand the politics behind it all, but not to sound too much in line with the conservative platform, but again, having a mix that involves wind, solar, nuclear would ease us off a lot of this foreign dependence on oil.
The grid is stressed primarily in the load centers in the East Coast and the West Coast. As we add more and more wind, that stress is going to increase. ultimately we're going to get to a point where the stress increases so much that we're going to stop our development. The acceleration that we have of 8,000 megawatts last year of new wind, 3,000 megawatts just in the first quarter of 2009, there's going to be a point where it will cease unless we build up the grid into a strong and substantial grid that can handle these loads and move them to load centers. Because the grid we have now was not built for that purpose.
Man, can you believe, I mean, remember we came in like 1979 or 82 or whatever it was, and there's nobody here. I mean, you know, the whole building was like the size of this. I don't know, man. It's, you know, all these companies, and I mean, probably the total amount of money spent on an exhibition booth is what we get at one of these now, don't you think? I tell you, a lot of people, a lot of things.
It's something else.
But it's kind of fun. We go by these guys. We know a lot of these people.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yes. We've worked with many of them too.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's Edison.
It's nice to see also, you know, as you made comment about this, how many people are still around who are around them too.
Oh yeah. Well, most of there's no better job. None of us can think of anything else to do.
I've been the editor of Wind Power Monthly for 25 years, and we're celebrating our 25 years anniversary this year. In fact, we started the magazine in 1985, and it started out of Denmark, which was where the wind power industry's birthplace is. And I've seen this industry grow massively, and now we're in a situation where I don't think anybody realizes how big this industry is going to grow. It's going to be absolutely enormous.
We have 20,000 members all over the industry, the banks, the laws and so on. All sides of the wind energy is part of the German association. I am starting in the beginning of the 80s and take a farm of my parents and build there in wheat and rape and so on. And in the end of the 80s, I thought about what is to do in the future, what are the main questions to find money for the families and to do anything against climate change. It was a question for us all in these times of the end of the 80s in Germany, I think so, and it was a motivation to go inside to renewables. And so I'm planning on my own landscape on my farm the first wind power plant in 1989, and I'm building it real in 1993, and I was very happy in this time that it's functioned well. And I overgive my farm to the banks for doing so, and it was a high risk, and a lot of my neighbors said, you are crazy, boy, to go this way to invest in renewable energies.
Well, as we got into the early 1990s, we had survived just a horrendous setback for the wind industry, and we were really struggling to see the way forward. And pretty early on recognized that what we had to do was to bring down the cost of energy, of wind energy, because we were in a market where we were competing with oil that was in $10, $12 a barrel range, and natural gas that was $1.50, $2, and it was just a very tough competition. So we with renewable energy, you have to produce energy in a very thrifty way. And this exercise of how do you bring down the cost of energy, there's really no one thing that does it. It's a combination of capturing more wind, making the machine less expensively, being able to install it more efficiently. It's all of those things, and the only way we could see getting there was to produce our own turbine. So with help from the Department of Energy, by 1995, we introduced a 550 kilowatt machine that at the time was at the high end of the size of turbines by quite a bit. And that was followed with a 750 kilowatt, and then by the late 1990s, a 1.5 megawatt machine. And every time the objective was to bring down the cost. As machines got larger, you could bring down the cost a little bit more each time.
I've been coming to these events for 25 years, and I can remember an event which I believe was either in 1990 or 91, and it was in Germany, and we were about 1,000 people gathered to a wind power conference, and that was a very large number of people. Up until then, conference had been 300 people, 250 people. All of a sudden, we were 1,000 people in Europe. And we were standing around a bar the first evening of the conference opening saying, you know, this is fantastic, we're 1,000 people. And then I looked at somebody and I said, you know something, I think we might have reached 1,000 megawatt of wind power in Europe. We all started to think about that. We got out our serviettes and back of the envelope job. We all started to count how many megawatts of wind power we thought we had in each country in Europe. And we had 1,000 megawatts of wind power. We'd reached what we considered to be a huge number of wind turbines, and now the industry had really taken off. And to think that this year in America alone, 8,000 megawatt went into the ground in one country alone, 21,000 megawatt, 21 gigawatt went in around the world, somewhere between 21 and 23 gigawatt. We're at over 120 gigawatt of wind power now. And the growth I've seen in the time I've been in the wind power industry has been phenomenal.
So we decided to hold our conference in 1988 in Honolulu for the simple reason that we thought it would be the last annual conference we would ever hold. There probably wouldn't be an American Wind Energy Association in 1989. And we felt if it was our last conference, let's go at least get a write-off and go to Hawaii and enjoy ourselves. There were about 250 people in attendance at that conference.
Good to see you. Happy for you. Yeah. How are you? I'm good. Good. Look at you guys. You've come a long ways. Look at this. Yeah. Number one in modern energy. Can we, could we persuade you to go in and spend 2 minutes in? Yeah. Come on. That's amazing. So that's total megawatts? Mr. Secretary, good to see you again. See you. In Delaware yesterday. Delaware? Professor? That's the man that developed the offshore wind. Okay, thank you.
The financial crisis is nothing compared to the energy crisis that the world is facing. So we are expecting to grow 20% in 2009 versus 2008, despite the financial crisis, because the energy challenges are so large as they are. We have been in this business for about 25 years, and what has been driving us right from the beginning until today is to create green electricity. We started on the west coast of Denmark, a bit like a Danish John Deere, making products for the farmers in Denmark, and it has just been accelerating ever since, and we are now 21,000 people working all over the globe, and as the world's largest manufacturer of wind turbines. But the passion has been the same long before people talked about climate change and the green agenda, has to be to create clean electricity which secures energy independence.
I've been on the highway driving from Chicago occasionally into Wisconsin and I see I believe they're called wind turbines moving. And there's 3 of them and they're so beautiful and artful, but it always hits me like that seems like a really smart idea and why don't we see more of them? It's a natural resource and it's blowing every day and it just seems so smart and so obvious, and as we all start to be more green, you almost think, why wouldn't we be doing something like that which seems to be so clean versus things like coal and some of the more traditional things that we extract from the earth that we know have a lot of pollution.
How do we interpret these large turbines in terms of how much electricity they're producing? What does that mean in terms of the number of people that are served by a turbine, etc.? This very simple rule of thumb that for each kilowatt that a turbine is rated, that equals about 1 person. So a 2,000 kilowatt turbine, or 2 megawatts, will provide the electricity for about 2,000 people.
The question I'm asked most, when I go into the restaurants in the local towns or when I'm at public meetings or whatever the event may be is, well, how much electricity do these things produce, You tell them in megawatts or kilowatts, and that's foreign. So the best word picture, if you will, is, well, one of our 2.5 megawatt wind turbines produces enough electricity for an average of 600 homes.
Many of the farms that are built today are in the 2000s are between 100 and 500 megawatts. This is enough electricity for 100,000 to 500,000 people.
One of the important things from our standpoint when dealing with various communities is that, it's really a question of job creation. And so we're very heavily involved in a variety of communities because, quite frankly, where wind turbine projects are built are not necessarily very highly populated areas, and it makes a tremendous amount of sense for us to actually hire from the local communities. And of course, there's a direct community impact in such that I think most people don't realize that a typical wind turbine takes 60 cement trucks to pour the foundation. I mean, how does wind energy actually impact the economy? If we look at it, just over the last year, some 35,000 jobs were created associated with wind energy. And of course, that's a statistic that we publish through the American Wind Energy Association.
So we are growing up this industry from 0 up to 24,000 megawatts now. And so we're growing up from 0 employees in this industry up to 100,000 employees only in the wind energy industry. And I think it's functioned very well. On the other side, the utilities in the 90s said we have conventional power plants and we will drive them very well, and we drive them in high speed, and we don't look forward for renewables. We don't use them, and climate change is not our theme, maybe for the others, not for us as utilities. And so they wait and they wait and wait. The climate change is going on, and it was the private sector as investors like me do anything against climate change and take a market share of renewable energy today from 16% in Germany of the total consumption. And we have targets for the future, because we will have 47% of electricity of the consumption in 2020 coming out of renewables.
When it comes to Suzlon's perspective, here's a company that came to the U.S. in early 2005. We had 10 employees. Today we have more than 850 employees involved in 22 different sites in 13 different states. So it's part of this growth, but part of it's also the type of skills and attributes that you need to be in this industry, and it lends itself to operations that, frankly, make a lot of sense to rural America.
I grew up in Chicago, and I live in Palm Desert, California now, and I was able to go to the Cub game yesterday, and they won. Because I live in Palm Desert, on the Highway 10, there are windmills all over that have been there for quite a while, as I understand, to create energy efficiency. My power bill is quite high, and I believe that we need to figure out new ways to conserve energy and move into the future.
We've got to enable consumers' ability to communicate to the grid with their appliances and their loads and utilize those loads, including plug-in hybrid electric vehicles and air conditioners and dishwashers and water heaters, as if they're part of the grid, because they can be part of the grid given the communications and the technology that we have today.
There's another aspect to it that many of us who've known about wind power has not suddenly got better or anything like that. It's always been good. What's happened is that people have begun to realize how good it is. And it's a rather strange irony that it has taken a global financial crisis and a sheer meltdown to gather enough intelligence and thought behind it. And this is what has created the push for wind power. Because all of a sudden, wind power is the future. It is what's going to provide the jobs going forward. And it's taken this global financial crisis for the politicians to really wake up to the potential of wind power. So though it has happened very quickly, it has been a 25 years growth. For those of us who've been in the wind power industry a long time, we're sitting here thinking, yeah, and now you wake up to it. If you'd done that 10 years ago, we might not have been in the state we're in today.